and now I can't forgive myself. Hey guys, I'm Jess, and I'm 26 years old. Honestly, I never thought I'd be sitting here writing something like this. It's weird, thinking back on my life now and trying to make sense of all the crap that's happened. It feels like someone else's story, not mine. But here we are. So, yeah, my life is a total mess right now, and I kind of feel like I deserve it. But also, a lot of it is just stuff that happened, you know? My parents, Rick and Sarah, were like the perfect couple, or at least that's how it looked. They met super young when they were 16, high school sweethearts and all that. They had me when my mom was 19 and my dad was 20. Total unplanned pregnancy, obviously. I've heard them joke about it a bunch of times, like how they had no idea what they were doing but figured it out. I guess that's what most people do, right? My dad? Man, he was everything you'd want in a dad, or so I thought back then. He cooked, cleaned, worked like a machine, and still had time to hang out with me and my mom. He basically worshipped the ground she walked on. I swear I never heard him say a bad word about her. They never even fought in front of me, at least not when I was younger. He'd do stuff like make her coffee every morning, and every single time, he'd say it was because she deserved the world. That was my dad. And my mom? She was cool. She was the fun one. Always there for me. Always helping me out with school and life. My dad was the one who worked more, so I naturally spent more time with my mom. It wasn't anything deep or like weird favoritism, just the way things were. My mom's job was basically keeping everything running at home. I think that's why it hit so hard later. Because I always saw her as this strong person who could handle everything. But yeah, my dad always wanted more kids. He'd joke about having a big family, but my mom? She shut that down real quick. I never really understood why, though. Anytime the topic came up, she'd just kind of change the subject or say, one's enough. At first, I thought it was just normal. Some people only want one kid. But looking back, maybe there was more to it. Things started to change when I was about 16. My dad had a freak accident at work. He's in construction, so accidents happen, but this one was bad, like real bad. He was bedridden for months. 7 months, actually. We never had to worry about money, though. I guess he had good insurance or something, because we still lived in the same house, and I still went to my private school, which I now realize cost a lot more than I ever knew. But the accident, man, it did something to my parents. My mom had to take over everything. She got a job, started running the house, all while taking care of my dad. I helped out where I could, like doing chores and stuff, but I was just a kid. I didn't really get what was going on. I remember her looking so tired all the time. The fun, laid-back mom I knew started fading, and in her place was someone who looked like they were just barely keeping it together. I didn't get it then, but it was like something was brewing, you know? My dad, being stuck in bed, started getting, how do I put this, frustrated. I'd catch him snapping at my mom for little things, stuff he never would have before, like he'd get mad if the house was too loud or if dinner was late. I think he felt useless being stuck in bed while my mom was out working, and basically doing everything he used to do. It must have messed with his head. But me? I still thought my parents were solid. Sure, they had these little moments, but nothing that seemed like it would break them apart. Then, after a few months of my dad being bedridden, things started getting weird with my mom. She'd come home late from work, sometimes way after dark, and she was always on her phone, texting like crazy. I remember thinking it was strange, but figured it was just work stuff. I mean, she was managing everything. House, bills, work, my dad's health. Who wouldn't be stressed? But one night, everything changed. It was probably around midnight, and I was just in my room, lying in bed, when my mom knocked on the door. She came in, and she looked different. Like, really off. Her eyes were all red, and she looked like she'd been crying for hours. She sat down on my bed, and for a minute, she didn't say anything. Just sat there, staring at her hands. Then she started crying again. Not like little tears, full-on sobbing. I didn't know what to do. I just kind of froze. Finally, she says, "I'm seeing someone else." I don't know if you've ever had one of those moments where everything just stops, but that's what it felt like. I didn't even process it at first. She kept talking, telling me about some guy she met at work. His name was Luke. He was 26. He was just a couple years older than me. I didn't know what to say. My mom wasn't even done talking, but my brain was already spinning. She told me she wasn't attracted to my dad anymore, that being stuck in this situation with him bedridden was too much. And then she did the thing that made it all worse. She showed me her text messages with Luke. She didn't just tell me, she showed me. I didn't want to see that. She even started talking about how she felt alive again because of him. I didn't understand what she wanted from me. I was her daughter, and suddenly she's asking me to be some kind of confidant or whatever. It was all so messed up. Then she says she needs my help. She needs me to keep quiet, to cover for her so my dad wouldn't suspect anything. I know it sounds stupid now, but at the time I agreed. I was 16. I didn't know any better, and I wanted to help my mom. I wasn't thinking about the long-term damage. I was just thinking about how I didn't want her to cry anymore. From that night on, things got worse. My mom started coming home later and later. She and Luke would go out together, and I would tell my dad she was working late. He never seemed to question it. He trusted her, even though she barely spent time with him anymore. It all started to feel so wrong, but I was in too deep. I couldn't stop it. I thought I was doing the right thing by helping my mom, but every time I lied to my dad, it felt like a little piece of me was breaking. All right, so after my mom's confession, I thought things couldn't get any worse. I mean, I was already lying to my dad, covering for her, and pretending like everything was normal. But then, out of nowhere, she drops another bomb on me. It was a random Saturday afternoon. I remember it so clearly because I was sitting in the kitchen, just minding my own business, when my mom walks in and says, "We need to talk." Now, normally when someone says that, you kind of prepare yourself, right? Like, you expect something heavy. But after everything that had already happened, I honestly didn't think there was anything else she could say that would shock me. I was wrong. So wrong. She sits me down and just goes, "I'm pregnant." I swear, it felt like someone hit me in the chest with a brick. Pregnant? I couldn't even process it at first. I remember just staring at her, like she'd said something in a language I didn't understand. My brain was trying to catch up, but it just wasn't clicking. Pregnant. My mom. With Luke's baby. What? Was all I could manage. Real smooth, right? She nods, looking all serious, like this was some normal conversation to be having. I found out a few days ago. And now she's just telling me? Like I'm supposed to do something about it? I didn't even know what to say. I felt my throat tighten up, like I was gonna throw up or something. My mom, who was still technically married to my dad, was pregnant with another man's baby. And that man was some 26-year-old creep from her work. Does Dad know? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. There was no way he knew. My dad wasn't an idiot, but he was completely oblivious to what was happening right under his nose. She shook her head. No, not yet. I haven't told him. I don't know how. I sat there feeling this weird mix of anger, confusion, and sadness. My dad was working his ass off to get back on his feet after being stuck in bed for months, and my mom was out here living a double life. And now this? What was I even supposed to do with this information? Then, because clearly I hadn't been punched in the gut enough, she says, "I want you to meet him." Wait, what? Luke, I want you to meet him properly. He wants to talk to you. Nope. No, absolutely not. I didn't want to meet this guy. I didn't want to see his face, hear his voice, or even know he existed. But my mom was sitting there, looking at me like this was totally reasonable. Like it was just something I had to do because she said so. I didn't argue with her, though. I think I was too stunned to say anything, honestly. I just nodded, even though everything inside me was screaming, "This is a bad idea." A few days later, my mom arranged for us to meet up with Luke. She told my dad we were going to run errands or something. Another lie on top of all the others. We ended up at this restaurant, someplace way too fancy for someone like Luke. It felt wrong from the second I walked in. The lighting was dim, the music was soft, and the whole vibe was just off. I sat across from my mom, and Luke sat next to her, holding her hand like they were this happy couple. It made my skin crawl. The whole time, I kept thinking about my dad, stuck at home, probably wondering why his wife and daughter were gone for so long. Luke tried to make small talk at first, asking me questions about school and stuff, but I barely answered. I couldn't stop staring at him, wondering what the hell my mom saw in this guy. He was nothing like my dad. He had this greasy hair, shaggy clothes, and he smelled like he hadn't showered in days. And this was the guy she threw her life away for? Then, halfway through the dinner, they dropped the real reason they wanted to meet me. My mom, with zero hesitation, says, "We're keeping the baby." I almost choked on my drink. Keeping the baby? I hadn't even wrapped my head around the fact that she was pregnant, and now they were telling me this was happening for real? That my mom was going to have a baby with this guy? I don't remember what I said. Honestly, my brain kind of short-circuited at that point. All I remember was Luke grinning like an idiot and my mom looking at me, waiting for my approval or something. Like, what did they expect me to say? Congrats? Can't wait to have a half-sibling from this dumpster fire of a relationship? I think I just muttered something like, "Okay, cool." Because I couldn't think of anything else. What was I supposed to do? Yell at them? Walk out? It felt like I was stuck in some nightmare I couldn't wake up from. After that dinner, things got even worse at home. My mom was more distant from my dad than ever, barely spending any time with him. She'd always be working late or running errands, which was code for spending time with Luke. And I kept my mouth shut the whole time because I didn't want to make things worse. I hated it, but I didn't know what else to do. But my dad, he wasn't stupid. He could tell something was up. One night, I overheard him on the phone with a friend talking about how Sarah wasn't the same anymore, how she seemed distant and distracted all the time. He said he was worried, but that he loved her and wanted to make things work. That hit me hard. My dad was still holding on, still trying to fix everything, while my mom had already checked out and was building a new life with someone else. It all came crashing down when my mom finally told my dad about the baby. I wasn't there when it happened, but I heard the aftermath. They were yelling, like really yelling, for the first time in my life. My dad's voice was raw, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. My mom kept saying she was sorry, that she didn't mean for it to happen this way, but my dad wasn't having it. He kept shouting about how he had trusted her, how he had worked so hard to get better for her, and she had betrayed him. I stayed in my room, listening, feeling like my whole world was crumbling. My dad's voice eventually broke, and then there was silence. After what felt like hours, I heard him leave. The front door slammed, and I knew in that moment nothing would ever be the same again. Update 1. So after that huge fight between my parents, things went from bad to worse. My dad didn't come home that night. I think he stayed at a friend's place or maybe a hotel. Either way, he was gone. My mom? She was a wreck, like completely falling apart. I've never seen her like that before. She cried all night and I didn't know what to do. I wasn't about to go comfort her after everything she'd done, but at the same time, she was still my mom, and seeing her like that hit hard. I just stayed in my room, trying to block it all out. The next day, my dad came back, but it wasn't to stay. He walked into the house with this cold, determined look, like he had made up his mind about something. He didn't even look at my mom when he came in, just went straight to their bedroom and started packing. I could hear him throwing things into a suitcase from the hallway. My mom was standing there in the kitchen, just staring at him, not saying a word. Finally, she broke down and tried to stop him. She kept saying stuff like, "Rick, please, we can work this out," and "I made a mistake, but we can fix it." But my dad wasn't listening. He didn't even stop packing. He just kept going, like she wasn't even there. And then, right before he left, he dropped the bomb that changed everything. He turned to her, looked her dead in the eyes, and said, "I know about the baby. I know it's not mine." The silence after that was the loudest thing I've ever heard. My mom froze. She looked like someone had punched her in the gut, like all the air had been sucked out of the room. I guess she thought she could keep hiding it, that he'd never figure it out. But he knew. He had known for a while. "I want a divorce," he said, as calm as ever. "I'm done." My mom collapsed right there in the kitchen, sobbing. It was like watching someone's whole world crumble in front of them, and I just stood there feeling helpless. I wanted to scream at her for what she did, for messing everything up, but I couldn't. I was stuck between feeling sorry for her and being angry at her at the same time. It was such a messed up situation. My dad walked out the door with his suitcase, and just like that, he was gone. My mom didn't even try to stop him after that. She just stayed on the floor, crying. I had no idea what to do. I mean, what do you even do in that situation? There was no guidebook for this. For the next few days, things were tense. My dad didn't come back. I think he stayed at his brother's place across town. Meanwhile, my mom tried to act like everything was fine. She went to work, did chores, pretended like nothing had changed, but I knew better. I could see it. She was falling apart on the inside. Every time I looked at her, I could see the guilt eating away at her. And then came the papers. A week later, my dad sent over the divorce papers. It wasn't even a conversation at that point, just paperwork. My mom stared at them like they were some kind of foreign object. She didn't sign them right away. I think she was holding on to some hope that my dad would change his mind. But that wasn't going to happen. I remember one night she came into my room with the papers in her hand. She sat down on the edge of my bed, and for the first time since everything blew up, she looked defeated, like all the fight had gone out of her. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "I don't want to lose him." I didn't know what to say. What was I supposed to say? She had destroyed everything. I could see it in her eyes, though. She wanted me to say something comforting, like it was going to be okay or that she could fix things. But I couldn't. I couldn't lie to her anymore. "I think it's too late, Mom," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Dad's not coming back." She didn't say anything after that, just sat there, staring at the papers in her hands. It felt like we were both mourning something that was already dead. Our family, the way things used to be, it was all gone, and there was no way to bring it back. After that, things started moving fast. My mom finally signed the papers, and the divorce process started. It was messy, of course. My dad didn't want anything to do with my brother, the baby. He refused to sign the birth certificate when he was born. It was like he was erasing every trace of my mom from his life, including the baby she had with Luke. Speaking of Luke, he was around more and more. My mom was still seeing him, which just made everything worse. I couldn't stand the sight of him, but he was always there, acting like nothing was wrong. He even moved in after the divorce was finalized. Can you believe that? This guy who ruined everything for us was now living in our house. I tried talking to my mom about it once. I told her that it felt wrong, that it was too soon, but she just brushed me off. She said she was moving on, and that I needed to accept it. But I couldn't. I couldn't accept any of it. Around that time, I started pulling away from her. I couldn't stand to be in the same room as her or Luke. Every time I looked at them, I saw everything that was wrong. I saw my dad walking out, my mom's betrayal, and this new life that I didn't want to be a part of. One night, I heard my mom and Luke talking in the kitchen. They were laughing about something, like they didn't have a care in the world. It made me so angry. How could they just laugh like that? How could they act like everything was fine when they had destroyed our family? I don't know what came over me, but I snapped. I stormed into the kitchen, and before I knew it, I was yelling. I was yelling at my mom, at Luke, at both of them. I let out everything I'd been holding in for months. I told them how much I hated what they'd done, how much I missed my dad, how I couldn't believe they were acting like everything was normal. My mom just stood there staring at me like she didn't recognize me. And Luke? He didn't say a word. He just sat there, watching me lose it. When I was done, my mom tried to calm me down. She kept saying, "Jess, it's okay. We'll get through this." But I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear any of it. I walked out of the house that night, and I didn't come back until the next morning. I just needed to be away from all of it, from them, from everything. And that's when I realized I couldn't live like this anymore. Something had to change. Update 2. All right, so after that night where I blew up at my mom and Luke, things didn't magically get better. If anything, it got worse. I could feel the distance between me and my mom growing by the day. We barely talked unless it was necessary, and when we did, it was tense, like walking on eggshells. Luke kept hanging around the house, and every time I saw him, it made my blood boil. I couldn't get past the fact that he was part of the reason everything went downhill. But then something happened that really messed with me. It was one of those moments where you just can't ignore what's going on anymore, even if you want to. So, a couple of months after the divorce, my little brother, the baby, was born. I didn't think I'd feel anything when he came, but when my mom brought him home from the hospital, I couldn't help it. I felt this weird connection. He was just this tiny, innocent kid in all of this chaos, and suddenly it wasn't his fault. He didn't ask for any of this, right? He didn't choose to be born into this mess. The first few days after he came home, things were actually peaceful. My mom was tired, of course, but she seemed focused on the baby. Luke wasn't around as much during that time, probably because he didn't know what to do with a newborn. It was almost like a break from all the tension, but that didn't last long. A week later, I was home alone with the baby. My mom had gone to the store, and Luke, well, he was who knows where, probably doing whatever it is he does. I was sitting in the living room with my brother when my dad called. Now my dad had barely been in touch since the divorce. He'd sent me a couple of texts, asking how I was, but nothing deep. But this time he called, which was a big deal. I picked up, and there was this long pause on the other end before he spoke. "How are you doing, Jess?" His voice sounded different, like tired and kind of distant, but I could tell he was trying. I wasn't sure what to say. It felt awkward, talking to him after everything that had gone down. But I missed him more than I wanted to admit, so I just told him the truth. "I'm managing, I guess." He asked a few more questions about school, my friends, and then, out of nowhere, he asked, "How's your mom?" I didn't know how to respond to that. Like, what did he expect me to say? That she was doing great, living her best life with the guy she cheated on him with? I paused for a second, trying to figure out what to say, and then I just blurted out, "She had the baby." There was silence on the other end for what felt like forever. When my dad finally spoke again, his voice was flat. "I know, I heard." That's when it hit me. Of course, he knew. He wasn't some random guy in the picture. He was my dad. He probably heard through family, or maybe even from my mom herself. It wasn't some secret. Do you want to see him? I don't know why I asked. Maybe I thought for a second that this could be a way to fix things, that maybe seeing the baby would soften everything that happened. No, he said quickly and firmly. That's not my son, Jess. I've made my peace with that. I didn't say anything after that. I couldn't. The finality of his words hit me hard. This baby, my brother, was a constant reminder to my dad of everything he lost, and there was nothing I could do to change that. We didn't talk much longer after that. My dad ended the call by telling me to take care of myself, and that was it. I hung up the phone, feeling more lost than I had before. Later that night, my mom came back from the store, and Luke showed up too. He was acting like everything was normal, like he hadn't destroyed my family. I tried to stay out of their way, but every time I looked at the baby, I kept hearing my dad's voice in my head. That's not my son. It was the first time I really let myself feel angry at my mom, not just at Luke, but at her. She had done this. She had broken us. And now, I had to live in this mess she created. My dad had moved on, started over, but I was still stuck in the middle of it all. A few days later, something happened that really pushed me over the edge. I was in my room, trying to do homework or something, not that I could focus with everything going on, and I heard my mom and Luke talking in the living room. They didn't know I was listening, but they were being loud, so it was hard not to hear. Luke was complaining about something. Money, of course. He said he didn't want to keep paying for stuff and that my mom needed to figure it out. I don't know why, but that made me snap. This guy, who had waltzed into our lives and destroyed everything, was now complaining about money after everything he'd done? I stormed into the living room without thinking. Are you serious right now? You think you're paying for anything? You think you get to complain after what you did to this family? Luke looked at me like I had grown two heads, and my mom, she looked scared, like she didn't know how to handle the situation. But I wasn't backing down this time. I was done. You don't get to act like you're some victim here, I shouted. You destroyed everything. My dad's gone, and it's because of you. You think you can just replace him? You're not my dad, and you never will be. Luke stood up like he was about to say something, but my mom cut him off. She stepped between us and tried to calm me down, but I was shaking with anger. I'm done pretending like this is okay, I said, my voice shaking. I'm done lying for you, and I'm done watching you ruin everything. My mom looked like she was about to cry, but I didn't care anymore. I walked out of the house and didn't look back. I needed air, space, anything to get away from that mess. That night, I realized something. My dad might have moved on, but I was still holding on to the idea that things could go back to how they were. But they couldn't. My family was broken, and nothing was going to fix that. Not my mom, not Luke, and not me. Update 3. All right, so after everything that went down with my mom and Luke, I knew things weren't going to magically get better. But there was still this small, stupid part of me that thought maybe, just maybe, something could change. Like maybe my mom would wake up one day and realize how much of a mess she made. Maybe Luke would leave, or my dad would come back into my life somehow. I don't know. I was grasping at straws, trying to find some kind of hope in a situation that felt hopeless. But reality has a way of slapping you in the face when you least expect it. So it was a few months after my blow-up with Luke. I was doing my best to stay out of their way, which meant spending most of my time either at school or at my friend's house. I just didn't want to be around the house anymore. It didn't feel like home. But I still had to go back sometimes, and every time I did, it felt like this dark cloud was hanging over everything. One day, I came home from school, and as soon as I walked in the door, I could tell something was off. The house was too quiet. Normally, I'd hear the baby crying or my mom talking to him, but this time there was nothing. Just silence. I walked through the house, calling out for my mom, but no answer. I finally found her in the kitchen, sitting at the table, staring at her phone. She looked pale, like she had seen a ghost or something. I was about to ask her what was wrong when she looked up at me, and I could see it in her eyes. Something bad had happened. What's going on? I asked, feeling my stomach twist in knots. She didn't say anything at first, just handed me her phone. On the screen was a message from Luke. It was short and to the point, but the meaning behind it hit me like a truck. I'm leaving. This isn't working out. Take care of the baby. I read the message over and over again, hoping I had somehow misunderstood it. But nope, it was exactly what it looked like. Luke had bailed. He had walked out on my mom and my brother without even saying it to her face. I couldn't believe it. After everything, after he had ruined our family, moved into our house, acted like he was part of our lives. He just up and left? Like it was nothing? I looked at my mom, expecting her to be angry or upset, but all she said was, "He's gone." That was it. No tears, no yelling, just those two words. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't surprised. She knew this was coming. Deep down, she had to have known that Luke wasn't sticking around forever. He was never going to be my dad, never going to be there for my brother. He was just another mistake in a long line of bad choices. I didn't know what to say. What do you even say in that situation? I just stood there staring at her, waiting for her to do something, anything. But she just sat there, like she had nothing left to give. For the next few days, everything felt off. My mom didn't really talk about what happened with Luke, and I didn't ask. It was like we were both avoiding the elephant in the room. She threw herself into taking care of my brother, but it was obvious she was struggling. And I didn't know where I fit into all of this anymore. Then one night my dad called again. It was late, and I was already in bed when my phone lit up with his name. I hesitated before answering, not really sure what to expect. But when I picked up, his voice was calm, softer than the last time we talked. "Jess, we need to talk." I felt my heart race. Something about the way he said it made me nervous. I sat up in bed, trying to prepare myself for whatever was coming. "What's up?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause, and then he said, "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About you, your mom, and the divorce." I didn't say anything. I just let him talk. He went on to say how he had spent months trying to move on, trying to put everything behind him, but that he couldn't stop thinking about me. He said he regretted how things had ended between us, how he had shut me out, but that it was too painful to stay in contact after what had happened. "I miss you, Jess," he said, his voice breaking a little. "But I don't know how to be a part of your life when everything reminds me of what happened." I felt this lump in my throat, like I was going to cry, but I didn't. I couldn't. I had waited so long for him to say something like this, but now that he was, I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted to forgive him, to let him back into my life, but another part of me was still so angry at him for leaving, for not being there, for letting me deal with all of this on my own. "I miss you too," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't know how to fix this either." We sat in silence for what felt like forever. Neither of us had the answers, and that was the hardest part. My dad wanted to be in my life again, but the damage had already been done, and I didn't know if things could ever go back to the way they were. After that call, I didn't sleep much. I just laid in bed, thinking about everything. My dad, my mom, Luke, the baby. My family was so broken, and I had no idea how to put the pieces back together. The next morning, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living in this mess. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine when it wasn't. So I sat my mom down and told her I was moving out. I was 18 now, and it was time to get out of this house and figure out my own life. She didn't argue. She didn't even try to stop me. She just nodded and said, "I understand." A week later, I packed up my stuff and left. I found a small apartment nearby and started working more hours to pay the rent. It wasn't easy, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was doing something for me. I wasn't stuck in the middle of my parents' drama anymore. I was finally free. My relationship with my mom is still complicated. We talk sometimes, but it's not the same. As for my dad, we're working on it. It's not perfect, but at least we're talking again. And my brother? He's just a baby. He didn't ask for any of this. I visit him sometimes, and every time I do, I remind myself that he's innocent in all of this. One day, I'll tell him the truth about what happened. But for now, I just want him to have a chance at a better life than the one I had. My dad chose his new wife and her daughter over me, so I moved in with my brother. When Dad came begging for me to return, I hit him with news that changed everything. All right, so my name's Jason, and I'm 17. Life's been pretty messed up for a while now, especially ever since my dad remarried. I didn't think it was possible for things to get this complicated, but here we are. It's been a wild ride, and honestly, I feel like I'm stuck in a nightmare I can't wake up from. Let me start from the beginning, though, so you can get the full picture of how things went down. So, my mom passed away when I was 10, which sucked big time. She had cancer, and it was rough watching her go through it. My dad, who's 45 now, didn't handle it well at all. He threw himself into work trying to keep everything together, but honestly, it was a mess. He was barely around, and I was just a kid, not really understanding what was happening. The only person I could rely on was my older brother, Ryan. He's 22 now, but back then, he was 15, and he stepped up like crazy. I mean, this dude was basically my parent for a while. He'd make me breakfast, help me with homework, and crack jokes to make me laugh, even when things felt like they were falling apart. We became super close, like we had this bond that nobody else could get. Dad noticed and didn't seem to mind back then because he was too wrapped up in his own stuff. Fast forward a couple of years, and that's when Carla enters the picture. She's 40, works with my dad at his law firm, and came into our lives not long after her divorce. She's got a daughter, Molly, who's just a year younger than me. So yeah, I was cautious when Dad introduced them, but I wasn't completely against the idea at first. I figured maybe this is what Dad needs, you know? Maybe having someone around could make things better. Well, I was wrong. Things went from kinda okay to a complete mess faster than I could have imagined. Within 6 months of meeting Carla, they were engaged. I swear, it felt like I blinked, and suddenly my dad was planning a wedding. I remember just sitting there, wondering how everything moved so fast. I wasn't ready for any of it. One minute it's just me, Dad, and Ryan, and the next, I'm standing in this fancy bridesmaid suit at their wedding, watching two people I barely knew become family. The whole day was weird. Ryan saw I wasn't feeling it, so he spent the entire reception making goofy faces at me from across the room to cheer me up. That's when Carla really started to show her true colors. She wasn't too happy about Ryan's little antics and pulled him aside, telling him he needed to act more appropriate. Like, really? Dude was just trying to make me feel better. It wasn't even a big deal, but she made it one. Living with Carla and Molly after that was rough. Carla was nothing like my mom. She was strict, always making up rules about everything. I'm talking curfews, chores, and even how I should dress. Molly was cool with it, I guess. She liked the structure, but for me, it was suffocating. I missed how things used to be, where life was a little more relaxed, and Ryan would come by to hang out. Thank God for Ryan, though, because he didn't disappear when Carla moved in. He'd still come over to the house, usually with some prank or joke ready to go to lighten the mood. One time, he showed up wearing a full-on Superman costume. No joke, he walked in, cape and all, and claimed he was there to rescue me from the evil stepmother. I was dying laughing, but of course Carla wasn't. She got so pissed, saying it was disrespectful and that Ryan was undermining her authority. Whatever. Dad thought it was funny, but Carla couldn't take a joke. And that's when things started to get really tense between us. She didn't like how close Ryan and I were. She'd always make these passive-aggressive comments about how unhealthy it was for siblings to be that close, saying I needed to grow up and stop relying on him so much. Dad tried to play the mediator, but honestly, he was pretty useless at it. He'd defend me at first, but the second Carla pushed back, he'd fold like a cheap lawn chair. It was like he was too scared to stand up to her. Every time I looked at him, I could see that internal struggle, like he was torn between his wife and his kids. And it hurt, man. It hurt to see that he might actually choose her over us. The breaking point came last week during our Labor Day BBQ. Now, this BBQ is a huge tradition for our family. Mom started it years ago, and it's always been this big deal. Friends, family, the whole shebang. Ryan had just moved back home after graduating college, and I was psyched to have him around more. We were all hanging out by the pool, and I decided to sneak up on Ryan and push him in. It's a game we've been playing since we were little. He came up laughing, like always, and grabbed my ankle, pulling me in after him. We were both dying laughing, just like old times. But of course, Carla had to ruin it. She stormed over, face red, yelling at Ryan, saying he could have hurt me and that he was being irresponsible. I tried to explain that it was my idea, but she wasn't having it. Then she turned on me, saying I was too old for this kind of behavior and needed to grow up. By this point, everyone was watching, and I was mortified. I just snapped. I told Carla to mind her own business, and that she had no right to dictate how Ryan and I acted with each other. The entire backyard went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. I had never spoken to her like that before, and everyone looked shocked. Dad stepped in, trying to calm things down, but the damage was already done. The BBQ ended early, with everyone making awkward excuses to leave. That night, Dad came to my room, telling me I needed to apologize to Carla. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told him straight up that Carla was the one who overreacted, not me. I reminded him of all the times she'd tried to come between Ryan and me, all the times she'd criticized us, and how she constantly made me feel like I didn't belong in my own home. I asked him why he never stood up for us, why he always let her push us around. He didn't have an answer. He just looked at me, hurt and disappointed, and said I was being unfair. I was done at that point. I told Dad I wasn't going to apologize until Carla did first. He left without saying anything else, and now the house feels like a battlefield. Carla won't talk to me directly, only through Dad or Molly. Ryan feels guilty and hasn't come over since the BBQ, and Molly's trying to play peacemaker, but she doesn't get it. She's never had to deal with a new parent being shoved into her life and making her feel like an outsider in her own family. And that's where I'm at now, feeling stuck, lost, and not sure what to do next. So after the whole BBQ mess, things at home got real awkward. I thought maybe after a few days the tension would ease up, but nope, it actually got worse. Carla barely spoke to me, and when she did, it was through gritted teeth or some passive-aggressive comment about respect. Molly was still trying to play peacekeeper, but her whole "can't we all just get along" vibe was seriously starting to grate on me. I get it. She's used to this structured, perfect life, but that's not how I roll. I never had to deal with this kind of nonsense before Carla came into the picture. Anyway, I figured Ryan would step in and help, you know? Like, he's always been there for me, so I assumed he'd come around and try to lighten things up or at least have my back. But guess what? He stopped coming over. Yeah, completely. I didn't get it at first. I was texting him, calling him, but he kept brushing me off with stuff like, "I just need some space right now," or "let things cool off for a bit." I was fuming because this wasn't like him. Ryan always had my back, and suddenly he was gone when I needed him the most. So I finally cornered him on the phone and asked what the hell was going on. That's when he dropped the bomb. Yeah, I know I said I wouldn't use those types of words, but this one felt like a bomb to me. He said Carla had sent him this long-ass text about how he was disrupting the family and setting a bad example for Molly and me. She basically blamed him for everything going wrong between us. I could practically hear the guilt in his voice as he told me he thought it'd be better if he stayed away for a while, to let things settle down. Settle down? Seriously? I couldn't believe he was just backing down like that. I told him that's exactly what Carla wanted, to drive a wedge between us, and he was playing right into her hands. But Ryan's always been the peacekeeper, and I guess he thought this was his way of making things easier. It was like he didn't want to fight anymore. He begged me not to confront Carla about it, said it'd only make things worse. I could hear the exhaustion in his voice, and honestly, it scared me. My brother, the guy who always stood up for me, was just tired. I hung up the phone that night feeling more alone than ever. The one person I could always count on had basically checked out, and I didn't know what to do about it. So I just started keeping to myself more, staying in my room, avoiding Carla and Dad as much as possible. I knew if I tried to talk to Dad, it'd just turn into another lecture about respecting Carla and how she's been trying so hard to make things work. Yeah, okay, Dad. Whatever. Then came the new house rules. Carla must have been feeling real empowered after getting Ryan out of the picture because she laid down a bunch of new rules that were clearly aimed at me. First, she decided I needed a curfew, a 9 p.m. curfew on weeknights and 10 p.m. on weekends. Like, I'm 17, not 12, and it wasn't like I was out partying every night. But here's the kicker. Yeah, I used it. Sue me. Molly didn't get a curfew. When I pointed out how unfair that was, Carla said it was because Molly had proven she was responsible, and I hadn't. Oh, and she started checking my phone. Not in a casual, let's see who you're texting way, but full-on monitoring my phone usage, as if I was some sort of delinquent. She even threatened to take away my car privileges if I didn't start showing more respect around the house. And the worst part? Dad just sat there nodding along like a puppet. He didn't really seem to agree with her, but he sure as hell wasn't going to disagree either. It was like every time Carla pushed, Dad caved, and I felt more and more isolated. The breaking point came when I overheard them arguing about me one night. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop or anything, but our house isn't exactly big, and when voices get raised, you can hear everything. Carla was saying that it'd be best if I went to live with my grandparents for a while, to learn some discipline. She even had the nerve to bring up how her parents sent her to live with an aunt during her rebellious phase and how it straightened her out. I was furious. I felt like I was being pushed out of my own home just because I wasn't fitting into Carla's perfect little family plan. And the worst part? Dad wasn't fully against the idea. He wasn't all in, but he wasn't shutting it down either. That hurt more than anything. Like, after everything we'd been through, after losing Mom and trying to rebuild our lives, he was just going to let Carla push me away like that. I didn't know what to do. I felt trapped. I couldn't talk to Dad because he was clearly under Carla's thumb, and Ryan had bailed on me. Molly was trying to play it cool, but she didn't get it. She had never had to deal with losing a parent or suddenly having a new one forced into her life. This was normal for her, but for me, it felt like I was losing everything all over again. I was losing my home, my family, and even myself. That's when I started thinking about moving in with Ryan. He'd offered before, but I didn't take it seriously until now. The thought of leaving Dad behind tore me up inside, but I couldn't keep living like this. I felt like I was suffocating under Carla's rules, and Dad wasn't going to do anything about it. Moving in with Ryan meant starting fresh, maybe even changing schools for my senior year, but at least I'd have some breathing room. I spent a lot of time thinking about Mom during all this. I'd sit in my room looking at old photos or flipping through the photo album she made me before she died. There was one picture that always stood out to me. Me, Ryan, Dad, and Mom at the beach. I was on Dad's shoulders, and Mom was laughing while Ryan made a goofy face for the camera. We looked so happy back then, like nothing could ever break us apart. But here we are, broken. I wondered what Mom would say if she saw us now. Would she tell me to try harder with Carla? Would she understand why I couldn't? I didn't know. All I knew was that I couldn't stay in that house any longer, not with the way things were. So I made a decision. I packed a bag, grabbed the photo album, and called Ryan. That was it. I was done trying to make things work with Carla and Dad. If they couldn't see what was happening, then I couldn't stick around to watch them ruin what little family we had left. All right, so here I am, staying with Ryan. It's been about a week since I packed up and left Dad's house, and man, it's weird. Like, I feel relieved, you know? No more walking on eggshells around Carla or listening to her stupid rules. I can actually breathe here. Ryan's apartment isn't anything fancy. He's still trying to get on his feet after graduating, but it feels like home. It's small, a little messy, but there's none of that tension hanging in the air like back at Dad's place. The first couple of days were kind of nice. Ryan didn't pressure me to talk about everything, and we just hung out like we used to. We binge-watched some terrible reality shows and ordered pizza, basically avoiding real life for a bit. But as the days went on, reality started creeping back in. I knew I couldn't just hide out forever. School was still a thing, and I had to figure out how to explain all this to my friends without sounding like my life had completely gone to shit. But the biggest thing on my mind? Dad. He hadn't stopped texting and calling since the minute I walked out the door. At first, I ignored it. I didn't want to deal with him or hear another one of his lame excuses about how I should respect Carla or how she was just trying to make things work. But after a while, the guilt started creeping in. I missed him. Despite everything, he was still my dad, and I couldn't just erase that. So one night, after Ryan had gone to bed, I sat down with my phone and scrolled through all the missed calls and messages. There were dozens of them, most saying the same thing. Come home. We can talk this out. He apologized, said he didn't mean to hurt me, that he didn't realize how bad things had gotten. It felt like a knife twisting in my gut because a part of me wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he would stand up to Carla and that we could fix everything. But another part of me knew better. He'd been choosing her over me for years now. Why would it be any different this time? I decided to call him back. It was late, and I didn't know if he'd even pick up, but I couldn't keep ignoring him forever. He answered on the second ring, his voice tired but hopeful. We exchanged some awkward small talk at first, neither of us really knowing what to say. Then he dove right into it. I'm sorry, Jason, he said, his voice cracking a bit. I never meant for things to get this bad. I just didn't know how to handle it. I wanted to be mad, but hearing him like that made it hard. He sounded like the dad I used to know, the one who actually cared. But I wasn't about to let him off that easy. You let her push me out, Dad, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You've been letting her control everything for years. It's like I don't even matter anymore. There was silence on the other end for a moment, and I could almost hear him thinking, trying to figure out how to respond. That's not true, Jason, he finally said. You matter more than anything. I didn't realize how much Carla's been pushing you away. I thought we could make this family work. That hit me hard. I wanted to believe him, I really did. But something inside me just wouldn't let it go. Then why didn't you stand up for me? Why did you let her treat me like crap? I asked, my frustration boiling over. You always took her side, Dad. Always. He sighed, and for a second I thought he was going to start crying. I was scared, Jason. After your mom died, I didn't know how to do this on my own. When Carla came into my life, it felt like a second chance, you know? A chance to rebuild. But I never wanted to lose you in the process. I didn't know what to say to that. I'd never heard Dad sound so vulnerable before, and it threw me off. But at the same time, I couldn't just forgive him. Not yet. I don't know if I can come back, Dad, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Not with her still there. I get it, he said, and I could hear the sadness in his voice. But can we at least try, please? I didn't answer right away. I wanted to. I wanted to say yes and go back to how things used to be. But I knew that wasn't possible. Things were too messed up now. I'll think about it, I told him, and before he could say anything else, I hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation over and over in my head. Was I being too hard on Dad? Should I give him another chance? Or was I right to stay away? I didn't know anymore. I felt torn between wanting my old life back and knowing that things would never be the same. The next day, Ryan noticed something was off. I guess I wasn't as good at hiding my feelings as I thought. We were sitting in the living room, eating breakfast, when he finally asked, "You okay, man?" I shrugged. "Yeah, I guess. I talked to Dad last night." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "And?" "He wants me to come back," I said, staring at my cereal like it had the answers I needed. He apologized, said he didn't realize how bad things were. Ryan didn't say anything at first, but I could tell he was thinking hard. Do you believe him? That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? Did I believe Dad? Part of me did, but another part just couldn't forget how he'd let things get this bad in the first place. "I don't know," I admitted. "I want to, but Carla's still there," Ryan finished for me. I nodded. "Yeah." Ryan sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Look, man, I get it. I know you miss Dad, and I know you want things to be different. But if you go back and nothing changes, you're just going to end up right back where you started." He was right. I knew he was right, but it didn't make the decision any easier. For the next few days, I kept going back and forth in my head. I'd get a text from Dad, and it would make me want to pack up and head back home. But then I'd remember all the crap I'd been dealing with, and I'd change my mind again. It was exhausting. Finally, after about a week of indecision, I decided to have one last talk with Dad. Not at the house, though. I wasn't ready to face Carla yet. I texted him to meet me at the park where we used to go when I was a kid. It felt like neutral ground, a place where maybe we could talk without all the baggage hanging over us. When Dad showed up, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. His hair was messier than usual, and he had bags under his eyes. For a second, I felt guilty for putting him through all this, but then I reminded myself that this wasn't all my fault. We sat on one of the old benches, neither of us saying anything at first. Finally, Dad broke the silence. "I've missed you, Jason," he said, his voice soft. "I've missed you too, Dad," I admitted. "But I don't know if I can come back. Not with how things are." He nodded like he'd expected that. "I get it, but I want you to know I'm trying. I talked to Carla. I told her things need to change." That surprised me. "What did she say?" "She wasn't happy about it," he said with a slight smile. "But I don't care. You're my son, Jason. I can't lose you." Hearing that made something shift inside me. Maybe there was a chance to fix things after all, but I still wasn't sure if it was enough. "I just need some time," I told him, and for the first time Dad didn't push. He just nodded and said, "Take all the time you need." Update 1. So after that talk with Dad at the park, I thought maybe things would start to settle down. He'd said all the right things, told me he talked to Carla and that things were going to change. But even though I wanted to believe him, there was still this nagging feeling in the back of my head, like maybe this was just more talk and no action. It wouldn't be the first time. I stayed with Ryan for a few more weeks, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Ryan was cool about everything, never pushing me to make a decision. We kept things pretty chill, just playing video games and hanging out, but I could tell he was worried about me. I wasn't sleeping great, and I kept going back and forth in my head about whether or not I should move back in with Dad. It's like 1 minute, I'd miss him and think maybe I should give it another shot, and the next minute, I'd remember how bad things were and get pissed all over again. Then, out of nowhere, things took a turn I didn't expect. One afternoon, I was chilling in Ryan's apartment minding my own business when I got a call from Zoe. Now, Zoe's never been the type to reach out unless she absolutely has to. She's always been more on Carla's side, trying to keep the peace and not rock the boat, so hearing from her was weird enough. But what she told me next threw me off even more. "Jason, you need to come home," she said, her voice shaky. What? Why?" I asked, completely caught off guard. "Dad and Carla, they're fighting, like, bad. I think she's leaving," she said, her words coming out in a rush. My heart dropped. I didn't know what to think. Carla leaving? That didn't seem possible. She'd basically taken over everything at Dad's house, and now she was just going to up and leave? "Are you serious?" I asked, still trying to wrap my head around it. "Yeah, it's bad. I don't know all the details, but Dad's been really upset, and she's been packing her stuff." "You should come back and talk to him," Zoe said, sounding more stressed than I'd ever heard her. I didn't know what to do. Part of me was relieved, honestly. If Carla was gone, maybe things could finally go back to normal. Maybe Dad would stop being so passive and we could have our family back, or at least something close to it. But another part of me was wary. It felt too sudden, too convenient, like what changed? I told Zoe I'd think about it and hung up. Then I sat there for a while, just staring at my phone, trying to process everything. Ryan walked in a few minutes later, noticed I looked off, and asked what was up. I told him about the call, about Carla maybe leaving, and how Zoe wanted me to come back home. Ryan didn't say anything for a minute, just sat down across from me, thinking. Finally, he said, "Do you really think things are going to be better if she leaves? Like, I get why that seems like a good thing, but is that really going to fix everything?" I hadn't thought about it like that. I was so focused on Carla being the problem that I didn't really stop to consider if things would actually get better without her. But Ryan was right. There was more to it than just Carla. Dad had let all of this happen. He'd let her walk all over me for years, and even if she was leaving, that didn't change the fact that he hadn't stood up for me when it mattered. "I don't know, man," I said, rubbing my face. "It's just, if she's gone, maybe it'd be different, Maybe Dad would, I don't know, be himself again." Ryan gave me this look like he was trying to figure out how to say what he was thinking without pissing me off. "I get it, but just be careful, all right? You can't go back expecting everything to be perfect just because Carla's gone. Dad's still got to step up. You can't keep waiting for him to fix things." He was right, of course, but I wasn't ready to give up on Dad yet. I figured I'd at least go back and see what was happening. Maybe, just maybe, things could change. So I texted Zoe and told her I was coming over. The whole ride there, I was on edge, my mind racing. What would I find when I got there? Would Carla be gone already? Would Dad actually be willing to talk? I didn't know what to expect, but I had to find out. When I pulled up to the house, everything looked normal on the outside, but as soon as I walked in, I could feel the tension. It was thick, like you could cut it with a knife. Zoe was sitting on the couch, looking pale, and Dad was pacing in the kitchen, running his hands through his hair like he didn't know what to do with himself. "Hey," I said, stepping inside and trying not to sound as nervous as I felt. Dad stopped pacing and looked at me, his face a mess of emotions. Anger, sadness, maybe even relief. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Zoe just glanced up at me and nodded before looking back down at her phone. "Jason, Dad started, but he trailed off, like he didn't even know how to finish that sentence. "What's going on?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, even though my heart was racing. Dad sighed and sat down at the kitchen table, motioning for me to sit across from him. "Carla, she's leaving. She said she's had enough. I don't know what to do." I blinked, still trying to make sense of it all. "Why is she leaving now?" He rubbed his eyes, looking more exhausted than I'd ever seen him. "We've been fighting for weeks. After that talk I had with you at the park, I tried to set some boundaries with her, told her things needed to change. But she didn't take it well. She felt like I was choosing you over her." My stomach dropped. Was this my fault? Did Carla leave because of me? "I didn't want this, Jason," Dad said, his voice breaking a little. "But I couldn't just keep letting her control everything. I tried to make it work, but..." I didn't know what to say. Part of me was glad he'd finally stood up for me, but the other part felt guilty as hell. I didn't want to break up his marriage, even if Carla was awful. I just wanted things to be fair, to feel like I mattered. "Do you want her to leave?" I asked, trying to figure out where his head was at. Dad looked at me, his eyes filled with pain. "I don't know. I love her, but I can't lose you. I don't know what the right thing is anymore." For the first time in a long time, I saw how broken he was. He wasn't the strong, put-together dad I remembered from before Mom died. He was just a guy trying to hold his life together, and it was all falling apart. We sat there in silence for a while, neither of us knowing what to say. Zoe had disappeared upstairs at some point, leaving Dad and me to figure this mess out on our own. "I'm not saying I'm ready to come back," I finally said, breaking the silence. "But if things are going to change, if you're really going to put me first, maybe we can work on this." Dad nodded, his eyes filled with hope. "That's all I want, Jason. I just want us to try. And maybe, for the first time in a long time, we actually could." Update 2. All right, so after that conversation with Dad, I didn't really know where things were going to go. I mean, he said all the right stuff, but after everything that had happened, I wasn't sure if I was ready to just move back in and pretend like things were fixed. It felt too soon. And even though Carla was packing her bags, that didn't mean the whole problem was magically solved. For the next few days, I stayed with Ryan. But the whole situation at home kept weighing on me. Zoe would text me little updates here and there, like how Carla had taken a bunch of her stuff and was staying with a friend, but she hadn't fully moved out yet. And Dad, well, he was trying to keep things together, but he was clearly struggling. I felt bad for him, but at the same time, I was angry that it had taken this long for him to realize how bad things had gotten. Then out of nowhere, Dad calls me and says he wants me to come over for dinner. He's all like, It's just going to be us, Jason. No Carla. I guess he was trying to show me that he was serious about fixing things, but I was still hesitant. I didn't want to walk into another awkward family dinner where everything was tense and no one was saying what they really meant. But Ryan, being Ryan, said maybe it was worth going, at least to see where Dad's head was really at. So I agreed. I mean, what's the worst that could happen, right? The day of the dinner, I drove over to the house, and as soon as I pulled into the driveway, I could feel this weird mix of emotions. It was the first time I'd been back since I packed up and left, and it felt strange. Like it was still my house, but it didn't feel like home anymore, if that makes sense. When I walked in, Dad was already in the kitchen cooking, which, by the way, is not something he usually does. He's more of the order takeout kind of guy, but there he was, chopping vegetables and trying to look like he knew what he was doing. It was kind of funny, honestly. The place felt quieter without Carla's constant nagging, but there was this tension in the air, like neither of us knew how to act now that things were changing. "Hey," I said, walking into the kitchen, trying to keep things casual. Dad looked up from whatever he was pretending to cook and smiled, but it was that kind of awkward smile you give someone when you're not sure how things are going to go. "Hey, Jason, I'm glad you came." "Yeah, well, I figured I'd see what this dinner's all about," I said, leaning against the counter. We made some awkward small talk while he finished up the food. Nothing serious, just stuff about school and how things were going with Ryan. But I could tell he was working up to something. It was like he wanted to say more but didn't know how to start. Finally, we sat down at the table, and after a few bites of what was probably the worst spaghetti I'd ever had, "Sorry, Dad," he cleared his throat and looked at me. "So, how are you feeling about everything?" he asked, his voice a little shaky, like he was nervous about my answer. I put down my fork and leaned back in my chair. "I don't know, Dad. I mean, it's a lot. Carla leaving, all the stuff that's happened. It's not exactly easy to just move on from." He nodded like he expected that. "I know I messed up, Jason. I should have listened to you sooner. I guess I was so focused on trying to make this new family work that I didn't realize how much it was hurting you." I didn't say anything at first. It was the same stuff he'd been saying for weeks, but it still felt different hearing it face to face. Like, maybe he really was starting to get it. "It's not just about Carla," I finally said, trying to find the right words. "It's about you too. You let her treat me like I didn't matter, and you never stood up for me. Even now, I don't know if I can trust that things will be different." Dad looked down at his plate, clearly struggling with what to say. "I get that," he said softly. "And I don't expect you to just trust me right away. I know I've got a lot to prove to you, but I want to make things right. I'm willing to do whatever it takes." I could tell he meant it, but it still didn't erase everything that had happened. Part of me wanted to just forgive him and move on, but another part of me was still hurt and didn't want to get sucked back into the same cycle. "I don't know if I'm ready to move back yet," I said after a long pause. "I need time to figure things out." Dad nodded, and for once, he didn't try to push me. "That's okay. You can take all the time you need. I just want you to know that I'm here and I'm going to keep working on things, even if it takes a while." We finished dinner in mostly silence, but it wasn't the awkward kind this time. It was more like we were both processing everything, trying to figure out where to go from here. When I left that night, I didn't feel like everything was magically fixed, but I did feel a little better. Like maybe, just maybe, there was hope for us after all. Over the next few weeks, I kept my distance. I stayed at Ryan's and focused on school, trying to keep my head in the game. But Dad kept checking in, sending me texts and calling every few days. Not in a pushy way, but just to see how I was doing. It felt like he was really trying, and that gave me some hope. Then, about a month later, something happened that I wasn't expecting. Zoe called me, and she sounded more upset than usual. "Jason, you need to come over. It's Dad," she said, her voice shaky. My heart dropped. "What's going on?" "He's been really down lately, ever since Carla left. I don't know what to do. He's not himself," she said, and I could hear the worry in her voice. I didn't think twice. I grabbed my keys and drove over to the house. When I got there, Zoe was sitting on the couch, looking like she'd been crying. Dad was in his office, and when I walked in, I could see what she meant. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days. His usual calm, collected self was gone, replaced by someone who looked completely lost. "Dad?" I said quietly, stepping into the room. He looked up, and for a second, I wasn't sure he even recognized me. But then he gave me a tired smile. "Hey, Jason." I sat down across from him, not really sure what to say. "Zoe said you've been struggling." He sighed and rubbed his face. "Yeah, I guess I have been. It's just everything." Carla leaving, the stuff with you. I'm trying, Jason. I really am. But I feel like I've failed at everything. Hearing him say that hit me hard. I'd been so focused on my own anger and hurt that I hadn't really thought about how much this was affecting him. He'd lost a lot too. His wife, his relationship with me. It wasn't just about me anymore. You haven't failed, Dad, I said, my voice softer than I expected. You're still here. You're still trying. That's what matters. He looked up at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes. You really think so? Yeah, I said, nodding. We're both still figuring it out, but we can do this. We'll get through it. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I actually believed it. We weren't there yet, but we were on the right path. And that was enough for now.